It's exciting to be here together. We are working really hard. Bridgewater Church is working really hard to up our game when it comes to training. It's an elusive animal, trying to get everybody on the same page. And whether you are in a single location, and so Bridgewater people, you know that even at your campus, the ministry teams that you serve on, sometimes it's hard to get your people together and train and go over things that you need to go over. And the same is true for us at the campus level and then at the church level. When you're dealing with multiple campuses, it's hard to do. And we just realized that we cannot expect great results when we're not giving great effort toward training. So that's sort of how these training days sort of came to be. So thank you for making the trip from your campus. Thanks to our other churches who are taking part in this. Not sure if all of our Bridgewater people know, but every time that we get our people together to train like this, we just invite anyone who wants to come to receive training to do that, and we just learn together. Some of us have already asked really good questions and have a good beat on what we're doing, and we just need to continue to do that together, bouncing ideas off each other. No one, I don't think, has the corner on the market when it comes to this kind of stuff. So we're just going to do our level best today to provide some framework toward what we're doing and help us prepare. In less than 2 weeks, in fact, in just over a week, our student ministries are kicking off again for the fall, and we're looking forward to that. So I know that the timing of this falling on Labor Day isn't favorable. I get it, but it is the time we have, and so thanks for making the effort to be here. Hopefully today is worth your while. There's been a lot of people giving a lot of input. Hopefully that will result in you walking away encouraged, equipped, excited, and honestly just ready to go into your ministry context and start serving. I want to answer the question today, first in this session, what are we trying to do? What are we doing? Not only in this conference today, this training, but also what are we trying to do in student ministries? There was a day, and some of you, as I look around the room, may remember when youth ministry was more cutting edge, when it was a new thing. I think throughout history, there have been a lot of people who have given special attention to young people, but it really wasn't until the mid-1900s, 50s, 60s, and then 70s especially, when student ministry or youth ministry really took off and churches started taking it seriously. We've had youth outreaches all in church history and things like that, but as a church program or a branch of the church's ministry, it really wasn't a big thing until later in the 1900s. And what was amazing is that a group of people saw young people and knew that they needed God. They needed to be introduced to Jesus Christ. And there were no rules. There was no box to play in. There was no traditions to hold on to. They just said, who are these kids? What's true of them, and what can we do to reach them? What do we need to do? And that's what they did. And so they just went after it with all their heart and used a ton of different things. If you remember or think back to or go online and research about the 1970s, you would get groups of teenagers in the field or in the backyard, and one of them would have his guitar, and they would start playing some songs and singing together and have a bonfire. And big church wasn't doing that. The adults weren't doing that. They had a very well-developed, predictable, and for the most part, effective strategy for adults. And that the culture worked for big church to be the way big church was and youth group to be the way youth group was. Now, fast forward decades later, it's interesting now, many churches in big church are sort of rewriting the rules. They're doing things differently. They're figuring out how to engage people. They're saying, hey, culture has changed. The state of our adults in the nation has changed. What do we do? And Bridgewater is one such church. Long before I ever got here, Bridgewater started saying, here we are in Montrose. How do we reach the people in Montrose? And really just going after that, trying to ask and answer that question. And God has brought Bridgewater through a number of iterations and growth and now campuses. I'm new in on that game. I served in New York State for 9 years, from 2008 to 2017, and joined the staff at Bridgewater July of 2017, so now just over 2 years. I grew up in a great youth ministry. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But now here we are. Big church is sort of cutting edge. And where this training today grew out of is just wondering what more can be done. I'm going to talk about research today, a little bit of research. I want you to know that from 2014 to present day, high school ministry at Bridgewater and also across the country has been on a steady decline. Not a dramatic decline, but a predictable, steady decline. And so students are attending less. Not only attending less, they're engaging less. And I'm talking high school students now, 9th through 12th grade. And middle schoolers, by the way, are attending more and more. They're excited to be engaged. The statistics look good on middle school ministry. But something needed to change for high school. And so I began to do some research, and I called a number of churches that if I said their names, you would recognize those names. If I said the names of their pastors, you would recognize those names. And I said, hey, are you seeing a decline? Take me back to 2014, which is as old as I could find statistics for Bridgewater. And do you see that decline? And some of them had to get back to me after a period of time, and they said, yes, we're seeing a decline. Okay. What are we doing? What have you guys tried? What's going on? What does youth group look like for you? Here's the answer that came back to me over and over again. We meet at the building one night a week. We have a time of teaching. We have some small groups. Some of them had worship music. Some didn't. They played some games, and they might eat some food. Okay. And over and again, that's what happened. And so, though big church has become cutting edge, student ministries, in large measure, it's not fair to say everyone, because I didn't talk to everyone, and I'm confident there's someone else out there who's doing some amazing things. I haven't found them. Student ministry has remained the same, but now we're seeing the students are attending less and less. What are we going to do? And that's the question that we want to sort of wrestle with today. What are we going to do about it? I want you to know we don't have the answers. We just hope to ask more and better questions. And we're going to try some things out this year. I'll introduce that to you. But I just want you to know that we as a church are committed to being missionaries in our community. We would expect any missionary that we send out from our churches to go to a culture, assess the culture, figure out what makes the people tick, what does it take to effectively minister to those people, and do that. And we will fund it as a church. And I just want you to know that we at Bridgewater, we're doing that. We're not doing anything but that. We just want to reach the people that God has put in our sphere of influence. So that's what today is about. So that being said, we today want to assess our situation. What's going on in student ministries that we need to be aware of? What's going on in students' lives that we need to be aware of? And how does that inform how we do youth group? How does that inform how we approach students today? We need to assess our situation. And I got to tell you, up until the last couple of years, I've done zero study on generations. Baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and now Generation Z. But when I began to have these thoughts, and I had some introductory conversations, one person I talked to said, you just need to do a bunch of research on Generation Z. Or he actually said, I don't even know what the generation is called, but do some research on it. I was like, okay. And I just, it was sort of a nickel and dime sort of comment, but I began chasing it. Here's what I found. Here are some things that shape Generation Z. These are kids roughly 13 to 17. It is bigger than that. Generations are typically around the 15-year. But I'm talking about your middle schoolers, your high schoolers. Okay? These are kids who are already in your youth group, and probably those who are in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. All right? This is what's true of them. And this is just an overview. This is from Barna, by the way. And they have a book out on Generation Z, really helpful. But here's part of what they say. Technology, more than half of Gen Z uses screen media 4 hours or more each day. Parents, these are your kids. And you're like, no, my kids are younger than that. Then your kids are Generation Alpha, and they're going to use it even more. Okay? Diversity, they're ethnically very diverse. Security, most of Gen Z believes that happiness is their ultimate goal, specifically through financial success. And Generation Z, they are creating ways to make money. Social media influencer, big money. Generation Z capitalizes on that. Here's an interesting one, worldview. Only 4% of Gen Z says that they have a biblical worldview. 4%. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It's not as bleak as it might sound. And then identity. Gender and sexuality is how most of Gen Z determines self. Okay, but even we know that in today's culture that's fluid. And now in our culture we're able to define our sexuality, our gender. And then family is no longer core to their identity. And we're going to talk about the rise of the household and the demise of the family just for a couple minutes. But when I say assess our situation, this is what I'm talking about. These are some of the realities that are facing us, just some. And so we want to take into account what's true of this generation. And though we can't possibly tackle all that today, I just want to build an awareness in all of you that we have to assess our situation. What worked for me when I was in youth group is not working for the kids that are in our youth group. What I was willing to do or what my parents were willing to force me to do, parents are not so willing to force their kids to do anymore, or the kids themselves aren't willing to do it. So we want to assess our situation, be missionaries, and diagnose our culture. We also want to evaluate our approach. What that's part of our student ministries is working. Where are we seeing fruit? What are the highlights? When we get together and say, what are some highlights from your student ministry, from your youth group last night, and you go over that with your team, what are those things that rise to the top and we want to celebrate? And what are those things that we're doing and wondering, why are we doing it? Should we still be doing it? And because of technology, we're going to need to be asking questions like that far more often, because the world is capable of changing far more quickly now because we are connected. So we want to evaluate our approach. Thirdly, we want to align our efforts, specifically Bridgewater's campuses of Conklin, Halstead, Montrose, Tunkhannock, and Vestal. We want to make sure that we are aimed in the same direction. Every one of our campuses has a unique flavor and personality, for sure. And that's great. We want to celebrate that. But we also want to make sure that we are doing the same thing, headed in the same direction. And that's part of what we want to do today. And if one campus is winning and killing it, then we want to learn from that campus. And if one campus is lagging behind, we want to make sure and support that campus. We're in this together. We're all on the same team. And those of you who have come from non-Bridgewater churches today, we're on the same team. We're doing the same thing, and we just want to work together to effectively reach this generation. So we want to align our efforts. And then fourthly, this is all to fulfill our mission. Our mission of making more and better disciples. Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples of every nation, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all I have commanded them, and even so I'm with you to the end of the age. That's what we're doing. So I know sometimes for us it's on Sunday nights, we can get lost in the weeds of what we're doing or how we feel or how hectic our Sunday was or the weekend, and we show up and students are coming and we know that we got to do something in a few minutes. What's that going to be? I don't know, but we better be ready for it. We need to remember in those moments what our mission is. And remember that we're serving today because somebody was living on mission when you were at a pivotal time in your life. What was true of them? What did they do? How did they provide you a sense of identity, a sense of security, a desire to want to know God? And what can you then do in turn to reproduce that again and again and again? Sound good? Makes sense? So that's why we're here today. That's why we're working together, and we just want to ask some great questions today and learn. Now, if we are going to reach this generation, one sort of item that has distilled from 2 years at this point of research is this. It's relationships. If we are going to win in any regard with this generation, we must be able to build relationships with students. We must enable students to build relationships with each other. But sometimes, when you're working with a different generation, it's hard to know just how to do that. And so to help us understand our future generation, let's watch this video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carl. So it seems like every other week, the kiddos of Generation Z seem to come out with new slang terms that quite frankly confuse the rest of us older generations. So the goal today is to learn how to speak some of that Gen Z lingo. And joining me today on how to translate some phrases is our favorite spokesperson for the Gen Z kids, my cousin Brock. Say hello, Brock. Brock, say hello.
Sup?
Alright, let's get started.
You guys have the Wi-Fi password?
Alright, Brock, we're gonna start with some simple ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, how are you?
Saw.
Friends,
Fam.
family.
Fam jam.
It was a fun event.
The fest was lit.
Okay,
Oh,
I'm about to leave.
I'm finna dip set.
Those are some neat shoes.
Them kicks are dripping.
I would be glad to help.
Bet.
My favorite team lost.
Dudes took an L.
My favorite team lost very bad.
Dudes got clapped.
He seems upset.
He little mad.
He seems very upset.
He big mad.
I like this music.
That's a bop.
I'm not lying.
No cap.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oof.
That's an interesting statement.
Weird flex, but okay.
I'm not a fan of these appetizers.
These apps are booty.
I completely agree with that statement.
Facts.
I agree.
Yeet yeet.
Excuse me.
Yeet.
Wow, that's exciting news.
Yeet.
Congratulations on your baby boy.
Yeet.
What does yeet even mean?
Yeet is yeet.
That doesn't help. It's like when fam comes slipping in with their drippin' swag, jamming to some sick bop. And no cap, you know these facts are about to be litty fresh to death. You're like, oh. I'm not big mad at that booty response.
Yeet.
I don't get it.
Weird flex, but okay.
I don't know.
I showed that video to my son. He's 14 years old. And I said, true? He said, pretty much. And then, after I saw that, I'm walking around my house and I'm hearing, I've got a boy 14, a girl 13, a girl 10, and a girl 9. And they didn't see it, but I hear, yeet, yeet. I'm like, and, there's all kinds of stuff going on that I don't get. And now the new one, I don't know if you've seen this. If I toss this to you, do you know what to do? And Dallas has got it. Kelly, you got it? Yeah. That's it. They're walking through the hallways just like that. And if someone does that to you, you just, why? I don't know. And why is this a catch? In what sport is that a catch? I don't know. That's why we're asking these questions. That's literally why we're asking these questions. Again, my name is Josh Jones. I've been at Bridgewater for a little over 2 years. I have a couple roles. I'm associate pastor at this campus, Montrose campus, so I just help Bob serve this campus and this community. And then I'm student ministries director, which means I get to have influence over all the campuses of Bridgewater and all the youth ministries there, and work with the champions. So at our church, if you are a ministry leader, the ministry point person for a ministry at your campus, you're a champion. And just interesting lingo. So I work with a team of 5 champions, all doing a good job working to do the same thing. I grew up in Elkhart, Indiana, First Baptist Church of Elkhart, Indiana. My youth pastor showed up when I was in kindergarten. And I know that because his oldest daughter showed up in my kindergarten class. And she was wearing a white shirt, blouse thing, and a red jumper. And that girl became my wife. I ended up marrying my youth pastor's daughter. And there was a day, and if you've heard him preach at all, or taken any of his classes, you will have heard that when I was in junior high, I was not a kid that he wanted his daughter around. In fact, the rule in his house was she was not allowed to say hi to me, and he made it very clear as my youth pastor that I was not even to speak to her. How rude, right? He was smart. I wasn't, at that point, following after God. I wasn't a great kid. But I grew up in a Christian home, youngest of 4 kids. I was made to do my devotions, made to spend time in God's Word every day. And I would say that in a home where parents also model that, that's a win. In a home where that's expected of children, but parents aren't doing that, yikes. That's a tough sell for kids, and they're not going to really appreciate that. But I did what my parents did. I came down as a paper boy early every morning, and my mom and dad were in their chairs reading their Bible. I saw their prayer list. I had access to all that anytime I wanted to. And so when they said, you need to make sure and spend time in God's Word today, they were only asking me to do things that they themselves had been doing right along. So no problem there. So I was always in God's Word, but not really connecting with it. I did come to know Christ at the age of 7. And that's another story for another time, but just a really great reality of my parents living out their faith that had a profound influence on me. But the summer after my 6th grade year, it was a turning point. I was 12 at that point, and I was introduced to a family of sins that I was unfamiliar with and I had never navigated before as a junior high boy. And that, for me, started me on a path of curiosity and then covering. Those 2 words. So I was first curious, and it was sort of innocent, and I was afraid, and then I knew it was wrong, and I covered it anyway. And what happened was I tried to really hard in my neighborhood. I had a really fun neighborhood to grow up in. A lot of friends. None of them knew Jesus. But then I went to a Christian school where everyone knows Jesus. Then I was always at church and youth group and things like that. But I had this life at home, learning to involve myself in a world of sins. Then I had this church and school life, and I just thought to myself, if I know this is bad, but it's really kind of fun. If I can keep this life separate from this life, I think I'll manage. I think I'll be okay. And so 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, that's what I did. I worked really, really hard to keep those 2 things separated. Now, I wasn't allowed to talk to Kristen, my wife, and she'll be texting me here right along. My daughter's running in a cross-country meet down at Misericordia today. It's her first one, 7th grader. So I'll be getting updates. So if I'm looking at my phone or my watch, that's all that is. But I wanted to keep those things separate. Little did I know that my youth pastor and our youth volunteers, they knew. I don't think they knew everything, but you know when you know. And there's something there in that student, and you can't put your finger on it. You can't confront it because you don't know what it is, but you're really trying to build that relationship. What was unsettling to me was that I got the sense that they knew I wasn't legitimate, that I wasn't sincere in my faith. And so what that did for me was I just put walls up and would not engage. I didn't want to talk to any of them. Listen, I was miserable. I wanted to walk with God. I just didn't want to give up my sinful habits. And so I would say that not every student who's, putting up barriers wants it to be that way. It's just sort of a defense thing, and they're going to need to choose. You can't serve 2 masters. You're going to hate the one and love the other, be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and. Anyway, what it took for me was a wilderness trip. And so summer after my freshman year, I went on a wilderness trip, and I was going to prove how outdoorsy and manly I was. And it was a high school trip, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And my leaders were there. My youth pastor was there. And the trip was great. I had tons of fun. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, until the last morning they handed me the map and the compass and said, here's where we are. Here's where we need to go. You get us there. You're in charge for the day. And I was like, yeet. No, I wasn't, because I didn't know what that meant. And it wasn't a thing, but now it is. I would have dabbed or something if I had known just how cool that would have been, how cutting edge. Anyway, so I ended up leading us, and I got us turned around. Guys and girls were on a separate trip. Both were heading back to the same lake that day, and it was sort of an unwritten rule that the boys had to beat the girls. You know, you just can't come in last. Well, when I got us turned around, we came in last. I knew it, and what happened was in that moment, I exploded. My anger, one of my besetting sins, anger, I just exploded at my youth pastor, at my youth volunteers, and just, I don't know if you've ever sworn at your youth pastor, but recovering from that's an interesting thing. But anyway, that's what God used to break my heart. They could all see it. I needed to see it. I wasn't going to change unless I could see what they could already see. You see that? And so I really want to talk about that because what happened was we got back to shore at the lake where we started, and there was my youth pastor who was traveling with me, but he got there first, better paddler and everything. And I walked up on shore and I apologized. I said, I am sorry for how I spoke to you and how I treated you. It was wrong. Will you forgive me? He wrapped his arms around me and said, of course I forgive you. And then I stepped back and I said, I should know this because I know you've taught it. I just haven't been listening, but I desperately want to walk with God. And I don't know how to do that. That began a process of him with a network of other guys and my parents too, putting guardrails up, real tight ones, because I was a big dummy. I needed real tight guardrails and a nice straight line to walk in. Otherwise, I just was going to, be like that sheep. And they just helped me, nurtured my relationship with God, held me accountable, gave me opportunities. But it was the very people that I had put the walls up with and would say that, I would say that I hated my youth pastor for those years. But you know what it was? It was that I could tell that he knew the truth about me. And it repulsed me, it repelled me. And I was afraid of being known, because if I was known, then I wouldn't be loved. And and there's a whole network of nasty thoughts that the enemy wants to use. So, relationships. If we're going to win with students, what do students need from us? First, in order to grow, students must be able to evaluate what God is doing. They've got to connect God's work in the world to God's work in their lives. My daughter got on the bus this morning to head to college or University of Misericordia or whatever it's called. She texted to say, sitting all alone, all the girls walked past me, went to the back. What does she need? In this moment, rather than just being, oh, woe is me, I'm so sad, I have no friends, I'm the new 7th grader in a new school. She needs to connect this to what God is doing in her life. How can I help her do that? How can we as student ministry leaders help connect what God is doing in the lives of these students to their own good, to their own growth? They've got to be able to see God in the equation. So we've got to help them do that. They've got to be able to evaluate what God is doing first. Secondly, they've got to be able to see what's true about themselves. During those years, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, I was doing my devotions every day. I was a paper boy from the age of 9 till the day before I left for college. 9 years I held a paper out, 9 to 18. And I was up at 5 in the morning, I would deliver my papers, and I was an early riser anyway, I guess, God's curse on my life. And so I would finish my route early, and I would come home, and I would just do what my parents did. Sit in the chair or the couch, open up my Bible, read, use my devotional, pray. I didn't always know what I was doing, but God's word doesn't return back to him void. It accomplishes its purpose. I didn't know what that was at the time. God was cultivating a heart in me, unbeknownst to me at the time, that I loved God's word. Like I was hungry for it. By the time I was a junior in high school, at the end of our year, each class got to put on a chapel. So freshman class chapel, sophomore class chapel, junior class chapel. That was me. I was the junior class president. And so it was tradition that every president would deliver a message at that chapel. And so I had to put together, I didn't know what I was doing. I had to put together a message. And I was reading one day in my Bible, Matthew chapter 25, and Jesus talked about being faithful in little and then being trusted with much. And so if you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in big things. And it just sort of captured my attention, and I started writing things down, and I got out Strong's Concordance and, comparing. And I put together this terrible message. I still have the document of the notes. Mercifully, I still have it. I can look back on it and say, oh, God is so good. But after I preached that message, my youth pastor at that point came to me and said, listen, not everyone who has your gifts and abilities ought to be in vocational ministry, but everyone who's in vocational ministry ought to have your gifts and abilities. So you need to consider what God might want to do with your life. What does that mean? I didn't know what that meant, but God was putting me on a path toward vocational ministry, and I just didn't know it at the time. I just wanted to play baseball. Didn't know yet that I wasn't good enough. Okay? Have to see what's true about yourself. I was not ready to grow or hear from any of my student leaders until I could see what was true about me. Students, thirdly, if they're going to be able to grow, must be able to do something about it. It's one thing to come face to face with who you really are. Me on that wilderness trip. Oh, I am a mess. I'm not godly. I've got all this filth, and it just came pouring out for everyone to see. What do you do with that? If students are going to grow, not only do they need to be able to evaluate what God is doing, see what's true about themselves, but they must be able to do something about it, because a moment like that could destroy a kid. Now everyone knows that I'm a fraud. Everyone knows I'm a phony. My two parallel lives I didn't know they were never parallel. I never knew that. The whole entire time I thought they were like this. They were always like this, and it was only a matter of time. And wise student ministry leaders created an environment where this collision was likely to take place. Which leads me to you and me. If we're going to help students grow, this is for us now. We've got to be able to build relationships with students. Whatever you've got to do to be able to build a relationship with a young person, you got to do it. And that's loaded, because there's a lot that probably requires. Understanding who they are doesn't mean you have to yeet or the other things that he said that I don't remember. But it means you need to be able to relate with them. You don't have to start playing video games. I have never once been a gamer. And some of the kids I'm closest with, that's all they want to talk to me about. Games and things and skins. V-Bucks. I know they exist. Don't ask me to do it. I don't know. My son over and over again, Dad, please download Fortnite. Please don't. I'm like, I don't want Fortnite. I will have no fun. It's not my thing. I love that you love it. I love that you have friends who love it. Good for you. For your birthday, I'll buy you a battle pass. There you go. See, some of you, this is over your head. And guess what? No big deal. You're not missing out on anything. Okay? But you do have to learn to relate. And now here's what's true. The same people that I didn't want prying into my life were the very same people I went running to when my life collision course happened. Why? Why would I go to them? Why would I hate them in one moment and need them desperately in the next moment? Because they had taken the time to do the hard work of building a relationship with me. They never compromised on their beliefs. They never compromised on their standards. Why could I talk to any girl in the youth group but Kristen? Because her dad was the only one who was willing to do something about what he saw. And I needed him. And he's the very one who worked alongside my dad and other men and made tight bumpers for me. And then gradually help loosen them up and set me on a path that I didn't know how to navigate myself. Secondly, we must help students see what's true about themselves. Now, what I don't mean here is run around and just point your finger in their face and say, I'll tell you what you are. You're a phony and a fraud. You're living two lives, and I know it, I've seen your other Instagram account. You know, the one you think no one knows about? Your other Facebook account, whatever it is. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is creating environments where we don't have to tell them what's true about them. They are confronted with it themselves. And so here we begin asking questions. Well, how do we do that? How do we create those environments? What can I do to help a student see what I see in them? And listen, my example is negative, okay, because I wasn't walking with God. There are plenty of positive examples. There are three, in education or teaching, there are three kinds of people. There are people who don't know that they know. Okay? That is, they are not aware that they really have more going on than they knew. And so you can help those people. All you got to say is, did you know? Here's what I saw in you. You have a great ability to whatever. And they're like, I didn't know. Like, you naturally connect with people. You put people at ease. Or you're a leader. And they're like, I'm a leader? And yeah. I just watch when you walk into the room, the whole temperature changes. There are people who don't know, or who don't know that they know. Thank you. Then there are people who know that they don't know. They know that they don't have a clue. And I would say this became me because I said to my youth pastor, I want to walk with God. I don't know how to do that. I need your help. You can help those kind of people too. You can help those kind of students who know that they don't know. They know that they don't know, so they're all ears. They're ready to help. My son, Cole, he's here. He helped with parking today. I'm not sure where he is in the building. He plays golf for Montrose High School. Had a match last night against Scranton Prep. As you can imagine, we lost that 9-0. Not one kid won the match or the better ball or anything. So it was really interesting. But the kids were great, super polite, really wonderful experience. I went golfing with Cole, and I really wanted to help him. I'm not a great golfer. I'm a decent teacher of things that I'm unable to do physically. I'm a bad golfer who occasionally plays well, not a good golfer who occasionally plays poorly. But I'm helping Cole, and I know enough how to be helpful, and he's not picking up. He's not listening. He's not applying. So finally, we get finished with a par 5, and he counted his strokes, and I also counted his strokes. I counted far more than he remembered. My count was accurate. And so I said to him, what score do you have to get on a hole? How high a score do you have to get on a hole before you start listening? Do you need to shoot a 15 on a par 5 before you start listening to what I have to say? And I said to him, I want you to listen to me. I'm about to break your heart. But I want you to know that I love you. And you have to hear what I'm about to say if you want to be successful. You're not good. You're not a good golfer. I bring you out here and hope that you see it yourself. When you watch my shot go, and your shot go, what can I do to help you see? Like, when will you listen? And he won't until he sees what's true about himself. Right? It's like you're a great cook until you actually bake something. Right? And then, and then you're calling mom or your mother-in-law, right? Or whatever. Then you're ready for help. And this is true of us spiritually too. The hardest people to help are people who don't know that they don't know. They don't know that they don't know. They think they've got it all together. And they won't listen. And I was a kid, prior to that experience on that trip, who didn't know that I didn't know. Because though I was hungry for it, I wasn't willing to give it up. I thought I could manage my lives, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And I wouldn't take input. I would go to snow camp. I would go to summer camp. I would go to events. I would go to my youth group. I would sit in my small group. I would all that, and just in one ear and out the other. Why? I already got this figured out. I got a great church life. I got a great neighborhood life. I got the best of everything. I go to a great school. I'm pretty well known. I'd say life all in all is pretty good until kaboom, right? So how can we help students see what's true about themselves? And thirdly, we've got to help them do something about it. I would hate to imagine how that all would have turned out for me if at that moment when I apologized and said, I want to walk with God and I don't know what to do, if my youth leaders or youth pastor would have said, I don't know either. Right? But yeah, you are rotten. You are a fake. Wow. Good thing God loves you, or I don't know. But man, we've got to help them do something about it. Help them put a plan in place. Help provide bumpers. Help them take not whatever that is in the future, but just the next right step. I don't know what God's going to do in my life, but I know I need to get into His Word. I don't know what God's going to do in my life, but I know I need the right people in my life. I don't know what God's going to do in my life, but I know that this is the next right step. And if we can help students do that, you take the next right step, and the next right step, and the next right step. After 5 years, Dallas Willard would say, you've had a long obedience in the same direction. Right? You are walking with God. So if we're going to win at all, if anything that we do, if any program that you have in student ministries at your church or at your campus is going to work, it's going to work because you are successful at building relationships. Making sure students are able to evaluate what God is doing, helping them connect the dots. Help them see what's true about themselves, and then they got to be able to do something about it, and this is where we can do that because we're right there every step of the way. When they win and when they lose, we're there helping them take the next right step. So we've got to win in relationships.